problem is when no other choices are permitted. There's absolutely nothing wrong with monogamy, and if that's what you want to do, I say go do it. One of the things that is definitively true about people like you and me is that we are in the sex field because we put a lot of time, energy, attention into sexuality. And we like to do that. I mean, we're specialists. That's what we do. Other people actually want their sex lives to be some small, predictable, reasonable-sized piece of their life. And maybe they want to go out and build houses or something. I don't know, you know. But it's like everybody doesn't necessarily want to be like you and me, I have discovered. And I have certainly made social gaffes with people when I think, oh, but, you know, you could be a slut too. I can show you how. Really, it's okay. You know, and they're like, but I don't want to be. I'm like, oh. Okay. So people get to make the choices they want, and monogamy is a perfectly fine choice. Or people might be monogamous for some period of time in their life. For instance, raising very young babies from birth or something like that might seem like a good time. Personally, what I thought, because my daughter was newborn in 1979, she is as old as my non-monogamy. I thought actually raising a child as a slut was a fabulous privilege because there were so many adults around. There were plenty of adults to raise the kids, so the family was huge. The extended family was huge, and so she could have, we had like a little village of people who were interconnected in these webs of connection in sexuality. Many of us had kids. It was post-Summer of Love. A lot of us were like seeing that we could project our values into another generation. And so we shared that child rearing. We shared a lot of other, you know, very basic family kind of stuff. And it was great. You know, the kids had huge families with plenty of adults.
This would probably be a good time to ask questions. If anybody has a question, just raise your hand, ask it, I'll repeat it so it gets recorded well. But does anybody have any questions for Dossie? Or you have the Yoda of slutdom right here, folks. Ask your questions. You have climbed the mountain.
I promise I won't sit on your head.
Sorry. Questions? Yes?
I'm a big fan of Dan Savage, and as much as he is such a long distance mentor to me in terms of sexual ethics, I'm surprised at how often and how quickly he resorts to answering someone's question by saying, "Oh, you guys just aren't going to work out. You need to break up." DTMFA. You know, if you have this or that difference with your partner, it's just over. And I'm curious whether, whether you have any thoughts on or experience with couples who, where one person in the couple wants, realizes they need to be an ethical slut, and the other person thinks they're bound for monogamy and they love each other and they want to stay together and they want to work through that. Just out of curiosity, what are your thoughts or experience with that?
Oh, great question. So thoughts on pairings where one person in the partnership is moving into ethical slutdom, or already is an ethical slut, or is discovering that about themselves, and the other person is more monogamous. Thoughts on can the relationship work, Dossie?
Yes.
There's hope.
Actually, tons and tons of people come into a therapist's office for this, because, and my office, because this can be very hard. Yeah, it's very scary to look at these differences, especially if there's a long-term relationship and kids and property and all this kind of thing, and the couple really doesn't want to separate, and the person who is new to sluttery has an enormous amount to learn, and the partner has an enormous amount to learn, and it's a lot of work. I think we say quite clearly in the book that teaching yourself to be, to sort of transcend your cultural programming about how it ought to be, requires work and effort. What I find is that for somebody who's perfectly content being monogamous and doesn't have any reason to do all that work, sometimes can get pretty resentful if their partner is asking them to do that work. And so that becomes a little bit harder. However, anything is possible, any outcome is possible. I knew a family in Boston who used to hold the polyamory lunches, and I don't know if they're still all together, but this is some years ago. But the family consisted of 2 gay male sluts, 1 bisexual male slut, 1 monogamous heterosexual female, and 4 children. And they used to hold the poly brunches every month. A monogamous person doesn't have to go and find themselves other lovers if that's not what they want to do. And it is perfectly possible to learn to deal with the emotions that come up. Everybody has to do that whether you're a slut or not. The emotions that come up in relationships aren't really necessarily solved by that other person promising to stand by you forever. Matter of fact, forever doesn't quite mean the same anymore, does it? Even our long-term relationships, we can all expect to have a number of major relationships in our lifetime. That's forever has changed its meaning entirely. Now that marriage is no longer the economic tool that it used to be, the requirement that it used to be. We're not agrarians anymore. We're not here raising the kids to, weed the vegetable patch so we can eat. So there's a lot of freedom and mobility in relationships that I think that we are building a culture for. Our culture doesn't really have scripts for that. We are creating those scripts even as we speak. So you are part of what creates that, if that makes sense. Now, any new person's exploration is part of what is creating the stories that are projecting us into the future.
Thank you. Another question.
Dossie, can you talk some about how non-monogamy differs in straight culture and queer culture, and to what degree it's a political identity in some sense?
So how non-monogamy in straight culture differs from non-monogamy in queer culture, and if there are any political relevances there as well?
I'm a bit of an oddball. Part of the understanding that goes into ethical slut is that I lived communally with gay men from 1974 to 1989. And so a whole lot of my slut technique is based on the lives of gay men. I'd probably still be doing that if the plague hadn't come along, which made these, well, they're all gone. And what I found was that gay men were living in lifestyles that I really admired. And possibly because they were male in this culture and they didn't question whether it was okay for them to wield power or make choices in their life. And no one had raised them to believe that they were supposed to have a permanent identity as a second-class citizen or a second fiddle or as the person who washes somebody else's socks. So for me, the politics of it was that this was very much part of my feminism. It was part of how I developed an independent identity. And when I was first a feminist, I was looking around saying, well, the straight world says I'm supposed to be like this, Susie Homemaker, and I don't want to do that. And then I ran into a whole bunch of lesbian feminists who thought I ought to be like that. So there were all these people who thought, well, they knew what kind of woman I ought to be, and I went and lived with all these gay men, and they didn't give a shit.